Hey, Howard here at 82 Maple. A super fun little project today that started with a tree that I've had. It's one of three that I've had curing out on the back of the property, taken down when we first got this property to make room for an addition on the house. It was about 18 inches in diameter at the stump, pretty well clear. I took a 16.5 foot log, the hydraulic log loader lifted it up, no problem. Everything was going super fine. And where we ended up for the day is with some of this material that you see stacked to my right. There's a couple of interesting little gray marks down there that were the source of the amusement and the challenge of the day. And I'll get into a little bit of that with you. Stay tuned.
Again, this is a really awesome tree. I trimmed it to about 16 feet 6 inches in length. The Norwood hydraulic log loader put it on the deck quickly and easily, smaller end facing the saw head. This entire tree produced nearly clear wood in the form of some true cut 3x12s and a couple of 2x8s and 2x10s, as well as some 2x4s and 1x4s to fulfill the custom order. I dropped a moisture meter on it, and it appears that 3.5 years of drying, if you can call it that here on the west coast of British Columbia, took it to about 22% moisture content. Super easy cutting. I'd honestly expected some kind of tough cutting, given it's been drying for 3.5 years and what I've heard about that. But all in all, a pretty routine job, except for one thing. And that's where this story gets a little interesting. Now, the deal is that for a couple of pieces of this order, I actually need, or prefer perhaps, to make a full 16-foot 6-inch cut for a long piece that's required. During the debarking process, I discovered this rather sturdy piece of wire embedded just below the bark line. Well, or so I naively thought. Getting out my trusty hatchet, I found that this beauty was in fact much more than skin deep. Instead of being just below the bark, at this point it appears there's at least 2 inches of solid wood between me and the wire that appears to encompass about 270 degrees of the tree. So I did my best to remove it directly from the area of the saw cut. Here I am using a 4-foot level to check to make certain that the saw is going to pass a full inch between where the two ends of the wire are located. I'm really not too worried, because what I also did that is not illustrated on this video is that I installed a throwaway blade.
So for me, a throwaway blade is one that I've used and sharpened 5 times. At that point, a couple of things happen. Number one, the blade steel seems to lose some of its hardness, and with that goes its ability to hold a sharpening for any extended period of time. Number two, I have at least 6 or maybe 7 blades that you're going to ultimately see on my wall of shame, where I ran them until the weld literally broke. A combination of it going past its best before date, and a combination of me not keeping it sharp enough and realizing that it had lost its sharpness. So at that point, what I do is I give that blade one last sharpen, provided it's not broken and not showing any cracking or stresses. I hang it up on the wall and I reserve it for that day when I suspect that there's some metal or some other embedded debris. Perhaps the log had been skidded through a rock pit or something similar. I try and remove as much bark as I can. I try and identify if there's any metal, but if I have any suspicion, I'll use that old blade, and if I bump into something, it just goes into the dumpster. No harm, no foul.
So, ready, set, go, and I dive into the cut. Here's what things look like 3 minutes later. Now, this looks a little more dramatic than what actually happened. I've removed the covers and I've removed the cutting blade from the saw head before attempting to extract the blade from the log. All this because 4 feet into the cut, there was a noise that was far more pronounced than I would have heard if I had just hit a piece of wire. And here's the culprit. a 1/2 inch steel bolt. I've taken my chainsaw and trimmed the wood that was released with the first cut, that first 4 feet, and at the top of the picture you're looking at, the bolt is about 3 inches deep below the outer bark. Then, at the bottom of the picture, you can see that it's stubbornly continuing on into the tree. Oh, joy! I number all my blades and keep a logbook series of entries for the 3 or 4 blades that I've got in various stages of use at any given time. Blade 20-14 has now retired to the scrap heap. That's the bolt cutter blade, minus a piece that I've cut out of it for my official wall of shame. I've now mounted replacement blade 20-15, a blade that has been sharpened twice. There's the usual dust and clean, a shot of grease to the drive and idler wheels, and we're back in business. Here I'm just lining up the saw to resume cutting. You can see that after hearing the unmistakable noise that a bandsaw blade makes when cutting steel, I've learned to move the saw head past the obstacle before shutting down so that I can reset, if I so choose, beyond the danger zone. Yep, you got it. This has happened before, and without a metal detector, it's inevitable when one is cutting what we in this area refer to as farmer wood. Checking, not too high, not too low, but just right, and we're off. Okay, finish the cut, and just for fun, because it's a Saturday afternoon, and I've got no particular time pressures, I'm now super curious as to just how deeply buried this wire really is. And it's a chance to play with an old-fashioned nail puller, this one being the one my dad bought when he and I were constructing a 2-stall garage 53 years ago. I was just fascinated by the journey of this tree healing itself as it dealt with the impediment of a rather husky piece of wire being wrapped tightly around 3/4 of the tree's diameter when it was about 60% of its current diameter. A bit of wood removal, courtesy of my debarker, and then a little bit of hammer and chisel work, and here we have it. And now it's a bit of man over matter tug of war. At this point, man and machine appear to be winning, but look at how the tree created its own healing salve in the form of a very pitchy substance. I took a thick slice that took me below the level to which the bolt extended, and then rolled the log 180 degrees, removed that slab, then rolled it 90 degrees, and that brings me right back into needing to deal with the opposite side of the troublesome wire. A little elbow grease, and finally the last of the wire is removed from a depth that confirmed that the wire, at points, was 3 inches below the surface of the bark, save for where it exited the tree to support whatever it had been originally attached to. Now, back to business and on to the next cut. Well, not so fast. Another 6 feet along the log and cutting fully 4 inches below the original bark surface, that unmistakable sound. Yep, another bolt. This time a smaller 1/4 inch bolt. Personally, aside from the annoying practical aspects of this discovery and what it means for the second saw blade involved in cutting this tree, I just love what the iron stain has done in terms of adding a wonderful coloring to this particular piece of wood. This is the view taken of the bottom piece of lumber that I just removed. And now, having sawn the longer length pieces required, it's time to get rid of any chance of recurring metal obstacles. I don't want to be guessing at the length of this bolt. So, courtesy of a new little still electric chainsaw, this is goodbye forever to this bolt, and now I'll apply my energy to cutting the 7-foot and 9-foot lengths of dimension lumber required. Here we are, all the 3-inch and 2-inch pieces cut. I've got the balance of the usable wood, including a 6x6 that I cut in half on another stack, but right now it's off to dinner. I've got to get cooking, for real, because Coral and I are about to dine like royalty on a couple of amazing moose steaks, cooked just so ever slightly above rare. These were provided courtesy of Dylan, a recently satisfied customer of 82 Maple. I'll showcase a project of his featuring some of his handiwork in an upcoming video. Pretty amazing stuff that he's created using some 8x8s, some 4x6s, and other beams that have come off this little Norwood HD36. But for now, looking at dinner, it doesn't get any better than this. Next morning, despite the frustration caused by 2 bolts and a sturdy piece of wire, the sun still came up. Amazing, I know. Edged a few pieces, and that's a wrap. Stacked them on top of the halved 6x6s, and here we are.
Hey, I totally get that me playing around with this wire and trying to extract it from the tree seemed like a totally impractical approach. But here's the deal. 3 things. Number 1, I was genuinely curious as to how deep that wire went and how the tree seemed to heal itself and still continue to grow around the wire. Number 2, I only have 3 logs that have been drying for more than 2 years. That's just a function of me being relatively new to this business. I knew at some point I was going to get a sawmill, so when we removed that tree, I had it set aside. But just because I ran into a piece of wire and a bolt, I didn't see that as enough of an excuse to dig into one of my 2 remaining logs to get this particular job finished. I have to tell you though, I was really impressed as to how this little Norwood and that blade cut through a 1/2-inch steel bolt. Now, if we ever needed it, there's a reminder to stay safe if I'm intending to keep all 8 fingers and 2 thumbs here at 82 Maple. Would love it if you subscribed, liked, commented below, tell your story, and stay tuned for more.